And we are live. What's going on? Welcome to the first row. Today is Saturday. We apologize for the technical difficulties we were attempting to overcome, but those have been overcame. And now we are ready to jump into the live first row Intersation. Today is Saturday, so it's a bonus Intersation. Today's topic is actually going to be on truthful transformation. And I have a wonderful, wonderful guest with me here today, Taralyn Singletary. Singletary. I always want to call you Singleton, but it's Singletary. Could you say hello to the people, please, Taralyn?
Hello, everybody. Thanks so much for deciding to be part of your Saturday with us. I'm happy to be here.
Your signal is a little laggy. Are you in a place where you have a good Wi-Fi reception at?
Yes. Let me try to see what's going on now. There we go. I think I might have just solved the problem. Does that help?
That is way better. So whatever that
whatever
you did, fixed it.
Cool.
So as always with Intersation, I like to start off with describing what an Intersation is for the audience, for those who are new to the audience or new to the show. Intersation is where interview meets conversation. And so when you add those two together, you get Intersation. In my life, I'm very privileged to have the opportunity to have very deep conversations with people. And those conversations, when I say they're deep, they go beyond that surface level of, how are you doing? What have you been up to? How's your family? How's your kids? All that great stuff. They actually go into deeper questions on like, what does that mean to you? How do you feel about that? Why is that the truth? Why is that something you believe? And because of that, I've had conversations where we've kind of ended those conversations like, man, it'd been great if people were able to hear that conversation. That was a really good conversation. So from that, Intersations was created in order to open up a literal lens into these conversations that I'm having. Not that they're all, I do have conversations where I joke and play and laugh and they're not, full of growth. But those conversations that do go deeper, I wanted to open a literal lens to the audience to be able to participate in those conversations and hopefully glean some of the stories and the experiential growth. Some of the experiential growth from the stories that are shared in those conversations. So with that, I do want you to know that you will see back and forth Taralyn and I engaging with each other on the video, but the live chat is for all to be able to engage and ask questions and contribute information. So I want you to feel like this is not a conversation between two people, but this is a conversation between all of us. With that said, I want to go ahead and give my guest, Taralyn, an opportunity to introduce herself.
Well, hello, everybody. As you've heard, Taralyn Singletary here. For me, this particular conversation is important because my background, I've always dealt with people working in sales and marketing for many years, but also I've coached throughout the years. And so as a coach, as someone who's always dealing with people, I really enjoy diving deep into meaningful conversation and exploring different ideas and things like that with different people. And Billy and I, we met doing some of that. Exactly. I used to be in radio a while ago, and Billy was actually my first live guest on my show. So that was cool. But anyway, that's just it in a nutshell. A mom, a grandma, a entrepreneur, a lot of different things.
All right. Well, for me, the reason why I brought Taralyn on this show, I didn't know until recently that I was her first guest on her show. But for me, when Carolyn and I first interacted with each other, it was a very uplifting experience for me. And it wasn't because I was on her show. It was just because I feel like that's the energy that Carolyn, let's keep calling Carolyn, Taralyn produces when she engages with people. So when we started thinking about which topic we wanted to do, we kind of played around with a couple of different titles, but we knew that it had to be something in regards to being honest with ourselves and genuine with ourselves and authentic with ourselves. But we also knew that it was something that would involve the transformation because we've known each other. I don't even know how many years have we known each other now, like 5, 6 years?
I was about to say, yeah, I think it's about 5 years.
Yeah, it's been we've known each other for a while now. Yeah. And the transformation that we've both undergone since the time that we've met each other. And probably we were already in the midst of it before we met each other, but that transformation that where we're at today, not that it's the end all be all, but it is a place now where I feel like our stories, or her story more so, should be shared so that people can start gleaning information from her, or gleaning growth from her. So with that, I want to welcome you guys to engage throughout the show, or if you're on the replay, engage in the comments, and I'll happily respond to comments later on at a later date. But I want to start off with my very first question that I ask all of my guests. What is truthful transformation? What does that mean to you, Taralyn?
Well, I've come to learn because that question could be answered in many different ways for me. It was an evolutionary process, but where I am now, truthful transformation requires taking a moment of stillness to connect to all of the background noise that may keep you from pushing forward, the authenticity of what actually holds you back. I think that in order to transform truthfully and not superficially, it's more about, or it became about for me, and learning through coaching other clients, it became about focusing on the background. We can push forward. But if you're really not connected to what's holding you back, then any transformation is going to be short term. It's not going to be something that's sustaining, and it's not going to be something that's completely and totally fulfilling. It could be more discouraging if you're not connected to the pull back when you're trying to push forward.
I like that, the pull back when you're trying to push forward, because you know life will try to drag you back to those old habits.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah, I agree, because when I was thinking about this topic, for me, like the whole aspect of truthful transformation, really what it came down to me was transformation that's sustainable. We talk about, in agriculture, sustainable agriculture, that you're not just depleting the land of its nutrients and then all of a sudden you have a dead spot on the earth where you can't produce food.
Right.
That truth creates sustainable transformation, and it allows us to kind of fight that tendency, or that I don't want to say desire, but I'm going to say tendency to slide back into old habits of comfort. Just this past week, I did a video on Get Uncomfortable, or just this week, I'm sorry, I did a video on Get Uncomfortable, and it talks about staying in that sense of discomfort so that you're constantly continually pushing towards whatever goal you're setting for yourself. And I think truth allows us to set some hard stops, or hard stop losses, on not being willing to go back to the certain person that we transformed from.
Yep.
So that's the easy question. I hope you got any nerves you had in your system. I hope you got it out. But I want to ask you my next question. Why do you feel that transformation requires truthfulness?
Well, if you're, and I think this is one that's, I think a lot of people will say, yeah, that's simple. But if transformation is not about authenticity and truth, then that means you're just shape-shifting whoever your representative may be. Your representative is not really who you are. And I think that a lot of times, in different ways, we all may have representatives, and it's not always intentional. But I think that when there's not a foundation of truth, typically I've learned just through dealing with some different people and coaching that there's a comfort that's actually a defense mechanism. So if you're shape-shifting who you want to present yourself as, but that's not authentically who you are, then again, it goes back to that's not going to be sustainable. It's not going to be something that you're ever going to be able to maintain. And not only that, there's always going to be that feeling of wanting, because it's hard to maintain something that's not natural and true to who you are, because you have to keep adding on to that things that are never really you.
Right.
Sometimes it seems harder to just do the work within yourself to be who you really know you can be, who you want to be, who you actually are. So that for me, that's the reason why that truthful transformation is so important, because it's so much more fulfilling to just own the skin that you're in and be at one and proud of who you authentically are, rather than to try to be something that you're not.
I think you touched two good points there, as far as that self-honesty and then your honesty with others. And I think it comes from a place of, your self-honesty perpetuates honesty with others because you're being so genuine with yourself.
Yep.
But I think there's also another area, and I would like to hear your opinion on this. I think there's another area that honesty or truthfulness addresses. And I think it's like kind of like doing a root cause analysis. When you do a root cause analysis, you're trying to find out what is the root cause of the issue. What are your thoughts on honesty as it relates to identifying the root causes of things?
If there's no honesty, you can never get to the root. And I think that getting to the root sometimes can be so painful, and it could seem so daunting. It could open up so many cans of worms. You know, they talk about Pandora's box. Man, you just crack open Pandora's box and you'd be like, man, that was like 20 years ago. I cannot believe that I actually have feelings about that, or that I even remember that. But, you know, it's so important to embrace everything about ourselves, especially the things that we're not proud of. Because when you embrace the things that you're not proud of, there's a lesson in it. And I think this ties into your question, Billy, because, you know, if you don't have the authenticity, I think the question would have to be why. What are you running from? And a lot of times we don't think about our fears and things that we avoid in that way. You know, it's actually that defense mechanism, but why? Why do you feel like you need to do that? And until you can really and truly crack down, you know, get down to the real of why it is that you're running from who you really know you are and what you want to be, then there's no space. There's no space for you to move forward in a way that's going to be sustainable and last a lifetime. You just cannot. You can't build a foundation on a bunch of lies and on a bunch of half-truths and on a bunch of facade. You just can't do it. You can't.
Yeah, there was a game when I was a kid. I think it was called Kerplunk.
I remember that. I remember that.
Where it's like a chamber and a bunch of sticks and the marbles, I think.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I think when you say those half-truths, I just see all these sticks intertwined, and then you tug at one wrong stick, which happens to be the half-truth mixed amongst all the other truths, and then all of a sudden all these marbles come just crashing down.
Absolutely.
So I agree with you wholeheartedly there that, you know, you can't build a stable foundation on half-truths. That's like trying to build a foundation to a house mixed with concrete and hay. It's not going to build you a strong foundation.
Not going to work.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was just going to say you're going to be compromised on your foundation, but go ahead.
Absolutely. My mother used to always say when we were younger, we're not going to take a little bit of the truth and mingle it with a lie. We're not going to do that. It's either going to be the whole truth or it's not. And in coaching, a lot of people think that when you're coaching, specifically if I'm on the wellness side, because I do life coaching and wellness coaching. Okay. If you're on the wellness side, people automatically assume that, you know, actually clients, they think that you're going to be talking about what their doctor told them that they need to do and how to practically apply that and what type of diet or whatever they want to have in their life. That's what they think that this whole thing is about. They always think that that's what it's about. But really it's not. It's only 20% about that and 80% about, okay, what's the why under the why? Why are you really here? Yeah, I know what the doctor said you have to eat. You might have a dress you want to get into. What's the real reason why you're here? And 80% of what we talk about or what we explore, you know, they never know it's going to go this way. But 80% of what we deal with has everything to do with underlying issues that pull back while they're trying to pull forward. That's what we deal with first. And because if we don't deal with that, then the other 20% of the reason why you came to me in the first place, we're never going to get anywhere with that. If we do, it's only going to be temporary.
Right. It's going to be for the dress instead of for
exactly.
Lifestyle.
Precisely. So for me, it always starts at what I like to call the negative real. I always tell people the negative real is real. The negative real is the absolute God's honest truth. And what I mean by that is throughout the course of life, who knows when it starts. There's content that we take and put on this reel. My uncle used to have this reel to reel back in the day. You know, he had the tape that played on one side and rolled on the other. Okay, so he had this reel to reel. So there's this negative content that we put on this reel. And some folks, they're in a space where they can have that content that they put on there and they'll move forward. I mean, actually learn from it. And then that's replaced with some positive things. Or a lot of us, you have content that you put on that reel, and that content just continues to build and play on that reel year after year after year. All these different things. And before you know it, the background noise in your life is that negative reel playing and reminding you of all the mistakes you made, all the things you're not proud of, all of the things that you've deemed yourself as a failure for, whatever stories you tell yourself. And then you wonder why, when you get to a space, a lot of those things you on a conscious level, you think you've forgotten, but subconscious, that negative reel is like the soundtrack of your life playing in the background, you know? So you wonder why in career, you're not getting where you want to get, relationships, things are not happening the way you want, your kids, you name it, social relationships, whatever it is. You're always able to take a push forward and then you're moving backward. Well, that's because of the negative reel. What stories are you telling yourself in the background? What are the things that are going on? And so that's what I spend a lot of time dealing with and talking about. It's not just about wellness, if that's what they're coming to me for, even career, what they're trying to do in career or family, or it just all depends on why they're seeing me. But it all goes back to that negative reel and how real it is. And some people don't even realize that it's there, you know?
Yeah, that unseen. It's almost like a negative reel has the same effect as a Marvin Gaye soundtrack. You put that baby on repeat, you get a result. But some people just keep playing that negative, and it gets that result because that's what you're focused on. So
absolutely.
So for my next question, I want to ask, because it's one thing to say that, you know, truthful transformation, using truth to sustainably transform. It's one thing to say that, but in your opinion, how are they established in the first place?
I think that establishing a real truth comes from failure. Sometimes we're not sure of what the truth for us actually is. You may think the truth is one thing, and then you have an experience and find out, okay, that's not what I thought it was going to be. In fact, that could have blown up in my face, or even if it wasn't something that blew up in your face, this particular thing didn't go the way that I planned. And I mean, I dotted every I and crossed every T. So I went into it thinking that the truth of a situation was one thing, but experience showed me that the truth was something else. So experiences, and oftentimes getting something wrong, helps you get to what the truth of a situation really is. And, you know, me, I was one at one point in time, failing at something was just like the end of my freaking world. I didn't see failure as something that I should learn from, and it not be something that I took personally. You know what I'm saying? I let a lot of things, a lot of personal disappointments define who I was. You know, not understanding now that I've gotten to a lot of truths about myself and become much stronger because of those situations. Those situations are the things that brought me to a space of saying, oh, okay, I got closer and closer throughout the years of finding out exactly who Taralyn is authentically, the truth of who Taralyn is from all of those different things. So, yeah.
So I had a conversation, I think like 2 years ago with a friend, and we did a small discussion group on this conversation. And it was about how our truths in our minds are all intertwined. So if you imagine like your truth, your baseline truth from your experiences are your lowest level, and you're building, let's say, a house of cards. And so you build all these little truths together to build your little house. However, when you build a house of cards, if you pull one card out, the whole house falls. How do you go back, using failure as the lens? How do you go back and address those experiential lessons of truth or about truth? How do you go back and address those without unraveling or collapsing your whole house of cards?
Well, I think there's two ways to think about that. On the one side, if your house of cards collapses, as you described, and you're going through the rubble, if we think about what the first thing that comes to my mind is when they're doing a fire investigation, and all you see is that burned up mess and that rubble. I mean, when I look at that, I'm like, you have to be a professional to be able to see anything viable in a situation like that. To me, that's like the worst case scenario. So if that's like where your building is, it all depends on how much truth was there when it was built in the first place. Some buildings are worth just scrapping and starting all over again. Maybe not even go through that rubble. Walk away from that and start over.
Right. Just
So
bulldoze it.
right. So it just all depends on where you started. So if you started from a place of the house being built on 90% representative, and then there's some truth in there, you should just walk away from that and start over. However, if you're on the other side, and maybe you had some things that were built up rather nicely, but you learned along the way once things started to collapse that, hey, there's a couple pieces that don't belong. I say embrace, first and foremost, embrace some of the errors that you made, because you can rebuild on that. It's not all scrap. Just by taking and brushing off and reassembling some of the pieces you already have, just to make it stronger, fill in those gaps with what you now know. Just fill in the gaps with what you now know, and then continue to construct from there. It's still viable. It's still strong. It's still beautiful, beautifully flawed. Doesn't have to be perfect. Who says that beautiful has to be without any marks, without any blemishes? Who says that it has to be that way? That's completely and totally subjective. So it's really just all in a perspective. But just because there are some scrapes and scratches and marred edges here and there does not mean that you still don't have a completely and totally viable, strong, and beautiful structure to keep working from.
That's true. It's funny. I had a conversation yesterday, actually, with a coworker. I had got some food. The day before yesterday, I got some food, and the food was like burned a little, and it was burned. We were talking about burned food in a good way and burned food in a bad way.
Yeah.
So I was like, yeah, this was not the good way to burn food. Well, then yesterday I go and I get some barbecued chicken, and the food is slightly burned, but in this term I would use it's charred. And that food was amazing. And I was like, oh yeah, they got the burn right on this one. On this one, they got the burn right. And so it is having that ability to look at, assess, and say, okay, what is too much and not worth attempting to build upon, and what is too little, or what is just right, and what is worth to continue to build upon, like sweep away what's wrong and keep building upon. So that's a good point. Karen Nelson actually said here, for me, truth is based on your upbringing and experiences, based on what you believe or what you were taught to believe. On the other hand, those truths are often changed and or modified as you grow. And I think that's a great point. What's your thoughts on that, as far as not being locked into your truths?
Absolutely. And I love Karen's statement. Love it. Because so much of what we bring into life, the majority of it isn't even ours to begin with. And I think flexibility is huge. You have to be flexible, and also you have to trust, in spite of everything that you were raised to believe and some of your narrow experiences at the beginning of life. You have to trust yourself in branching off into the belief system that works best for you. Flexibility is so important. And I didn't have a lot of that in the beginning. I just kind of thought a lot of what I was raised to believe, that life should just be built upon that. I mean, I agreed with some of it, some of it I didn't, but I don't know. There was, like, for me, just this pressure to adhere to traditionally what I was raised to believe. And so getting away from that and trusting myself and, creating my truth for myself. Yeah, that was when things really started to open up for me. Took some time. Took a while
Oh, yeah.
to get there.
It's,
Long
it's a
time.
project / process. So no, I understand that.
And then it's hard too when you have the people around you, in your family. Sometimes family can be just, man, they can just take and rain on any situation, because a lot of them felt the same way when they were going through what they were going through that you do. But there's just this, I think with some of the people in my family, they just stick with certain things that are tradition in our family just because it's tradition, even though they don't understand it. Doesn't work for them. Doesn't make sense. This is just what we do. That's insanity. That's absolute insanity. You can't just do something because somebody else did it or somebody else said that they did it. And then because you didn't have the courage to do something different with yourself, now you want to be the person to give me a hard time.
Right.
So another thing, just letting go of that outside noise and the influences and the interference, be it family, be it friends, wherever it's coming from, just to be able to stand in your own truth, and your own truth that's tested, and that's true because you've been living it.
Right.
You've been living it. No one else has been living and taking your walk in your shoes. So having the courage to stand in that, yeah, that's golden. That's when things really start to open up.
I think you address a very valid point as far as traditions. Sometimes traditions are just ignorant truths that we just assimilate to because they have been the norm.
Absolutely.
Every time I hear about traditions, it reminds me of the story of the mother who used to cut the edges off the sides of her roast. Did you ever hear that story?
Yeah.
Here you are, you cut off the sides of your roast, the next one cuts off the sides of their roast. And by the time somebody asks the question 3 or 4 generations later, it's like, well, what does this actually do for the meat? And it's like, oh, we just had a small pan, so we couldn't fit all the meat in there.
That's right.
It's an ignorant truth where you're telling yourself, oh, this is the way you make a perfect roast. And it's like, no, this is the way you fit your roast into the size of the pan you have. And the pan you have is large enough to fit the whole roast. So I love, every time I hear about tradition, I think about that story. It's like, yeah, no, I don't blindly just follow things because that is the way they have been done.
Exactly.
Karen also makes another point here. She says, hi, Taralyn, SJ, or hashtag SJSS. I'm sure.
Hey, sis.
I don't know what that means.
That's John's Secret Society all day long.
Oh, okay.
Represent. You don't know anything about that, Billy. You don't know anything about that.
Hey, I'm going to leave it alone. It's not my secret. Not my secret. So she also says some of those top beliefs are often shaped by insecurities and are imposed negatively on you, which are, I would say, are those fear tactics.
Yep.
Well, don't go outside. One of the fear tactics when we were kids was don't go in the bathroom and say Bloody Mary in the mirror and then turn off the lights because she's gonna come and get you. And
right.
And it's like, what is the purpose of this urban legend? What is the purpose of this tradition of handing this story down? Like, when you go back to the why, it's like, why would you not want me in the bathroom with the lights out? Because for me, that's what it seems like
yep.
Go to the bathroom with the lights out. So when you start asking yourself these things, you find out that some of the reasoning or the logic behind it is just, it makes zero sense. So,
true.
But with that, I do want to move to the next question, because I think it's important when you're dealing with truth and you're dealing with transformation that you realize it's not going to be this smooth process. It's something that is going to have peaks and valleys.
Absolutely.
It's also something that is going to be somewhat maybe turbulent at times. So I want to ask you this question in 2 ways. What has been your greatest process of truthful transformation? And the secondary question is, how did you find that mirror to look at yourself to start identifying those truths?
For the first one, the biggest point for me with the truthful transformation was knowing that I'm enough and knowing that what I believe is right for me. That's where it started for me, because I had so many things that had been written on my negative reel. Some of them from, just a part of my environment. when I was younger. I had so many different things written on my reel that just made me question things about myself that at one point I never did. So that was important for me, you know, to truly step in and own that, hey, what you're plenty. You don't need anything else outside of you. And what you think and feel within you is enough. You know, so that was the first part. And then I'm sorry, the second question again?
How did you identify or find that mirror to place in front of you to start interacting or identifying your truths?
I'm a spiritual person. So honestly, I always knew where I was supposed to be and what I was supposed to be doing. But I never had the courage to do it. And so what helped me really to step into that space and to look at myself was just deciding that I was no longer going to accept being unhappy and not doing anything about it. You can either look at this and start to work through it, or you can just continue to bitch and moan and waste your youth and your vibrance and your life away. You know, either you believe that you're something more than this or you don't. So really just my spirituality is what helped me step up and say it's time to really own who I am, and then start to peel back the layers and do the self-examination that was necessary to propel forward.
So when you say own who you are, how much of that is wrapped in forgiveness of yourself, from who you are?
Everything. It's all about forgiveness. In order to have a negative reel that plays in the background of your life and that's pulling you back when you're trying to push forward, you have to have content that you've invested in on this negative reel. And you invest in it when you don't forgive yourself. You invest in it when you take personal experiences or shortcomings within yourself, when you take those things and ascribe them to who you are, mind, body, and spirit. When you say that this is all that I am and continue to feed yourself that that's all that you are. Forgiveness is everything, because a negative reel cannot survive when you have forgiveness for yourself. If you're a person who finds it difficult to forgive other people, I bet you there's a lot about yourself you haven't forgiven.
Right.
Because typically what you are to yourself and what you believe to be true about yourself is what you project onto other people. If you say, for the most part, I'm an honest person, you know, then you tend to give other people the benefit of the doubt and assume that they're honest. If you know that you're a liar, you're going to be side-eyeing people.
Right. The old,
what you doing?
Must be cheating. You cheating on me.
Exactly.
No, you're cheating, and that's why you think I'm cheating.
Exactly. So if you're someone who can readily hold a grudge against someone else and you have a problem forgiving them, chances are there's a lot of things you haven't forgiven yourself for. So forgiveness is at the core. You know, I've had a few different people that I've dealt with when coaching, and when I bring up the negative reel, because a lot of people have never heard of it or never thought of it that way. When I bring that up, they say, oh, wow, I never thought of that. And, you know, I'm thinking that now maybe I do have one of those. Well, how do I get rid of it? And I always say that the negative reel is not something that you destroy or kill. All you do is change the content. The reel serves a purpose. You can put positive content on it that plays as the soundtrack in the background of your life. You choose to put negative content on it, but how you reset the content, it starts with forgiveness. You have to forgive yourself. And you have to move past that. You have to know that experiences are just experiences and they don't speak to who you are as a person, you know? So yeah, forgiveness is everything.
So moving forward, part of that forgiveness, I think, I agree with you, forgiveness being wrapped, or owning and being honest with yourself, being wrapped in forgiveness. It does address one thing. I think it also addresses another area. But I want to hear from you. What are your thoughts about when you're trying to use truth to transform? Sometimes that will create feelings of hypocrisy, making you feel like you're hypocritical. How have you been able to make those changes in spite of that feeling of being a hypocrite, while, you know, kind of like, you know, you're trying to be a better person, but you're not quite the better person that you want to be yet. How have you addressed those issues and concerns?
This is going to sound really silly, but it definitely worked for me. And that is, in this world, everyone wants for the next person to be one dimensional. That's what they want. But the moment that I realized that each and every person, including myself, we're all like diamonds and that we're multifaceted. There's so many different facets to one person. So then there's room for you then to have one facet of your being down. The other facet, you know, you're still working on it. Other facets you really haven't even explored, or you don't know that they're there. There is no hypocrisy in consistently evolving. There's no hypocrisy in that.
Wait. Say that again.
There is no hypocrisy in consistently evolving. That's what we should be doing. If you're not growing, if you're not expanding, then you may as well be dead. I mean, if you think about what it means to be alive, what it means to be living, what do you need? You need food.
Right.
You need water. What do those things make it possible for you to do? To grow. So if you're, and the reason why I brought up other people is because you can only feel like a hypocrite if you're measuring yourself according to somebody else's yardstick. Okay. If you're in your lane and you're on your own journey and you're growing and you're okay with, hey, okay, I got this over here. I'm cool with that. I've got that down. No problems. This over here, I need to work on. That exists over there. If you're okay with that, then a hypocrite by whose definition?
Right.
You're only a hypocrite if you own someone else's perspective of you. Okay. So no, there's no hypocrisy in continuing to evolve. And what I've learned is as I continue to evolve, that pisses a lot of people off, because a lot of people would look over in your yard and see how beautiful it is. And they want that, but they don't have what it takes to evolve like how you're doing. They're not going to push forward. They're not going to find that there's a negative reel. They're not going to do whatever their own personal work is. So the first thing they do is start telling you, or you start hearing words like hypocrite and phony. And yeah, it does not, none of that matters. All that matters is you're in your lane and what works for you in your lane. That's it.
Brian Gill says, people always hate when you make a change for you. And then just because I thought it was so powerful, Karen also said there is no hypocrisy in evolving, and she loves it. I definitely love that. That's going to be something in my house that I'm looking at probably every morning.
Indeed.
The other thing that you said though in that was that you are adopting somebody else's story, and that's why you may feel hypocritical.
Yep.
I think that is crucial to being truthful with yourself. Is you cannot be truthful with yourself by looking at a two-way mirror of which you're seeing through it. The person is reflecting their self on their side, so they don't see you. They see themselves, and they're building upon the truths that they're identifying within themselves. Meanwhile, you're observing them and looking through this mirror at them, and you're trying to sync your image. I always do it like this. You're trying to sync your image up with them, but it's a little off. So you're like, I'm going to go back this way. Oh, I'm off.
Right.
Oh, back this way. And you spend all this time trying to mimic somebody else's truths. And without that person's exact experiences and exact capacity to process information, you're never going to perfectly align with that visualization or that truth. So I think that is critical when you say, you know, you buy somebody else's story, now you feel like the hypocrite. No, your story is your story. You're going to live it whether you want to or not. Now, going back to the representative, you might be dealing with the representative story that you're trying to present and be hypocritical to that, but that's not your authentic self. So I agree. When you're being authentic, and if that authentic drives you to grow, then there's no way for you to be hypocritical to that. So I love what you shared in that. You've talked about in the beginning that those moments of kind of having that tension or that rubber band effect where life kind of wants to pull you back while you're in truthful transformation. Can you tell me some of the ways that you address that tension and not succumbing to the resistance of growth and sliding back into areas that you're comfortable in?
two ways. I think two things primarily. First and foremost, understand that fear should be fuel. It could either be fuel or it could keep you back where you're comfortable. Whenever you're sliding back to what's comfortable, it serves a purpose, especially if that space of comfort you were once in is not a happy place. So understand that you going back there serves a purpose, and it's meant to serve a positive purpose. You're just choosing to use it to disengage. So when you understand that fear is fuel, and that when you start to feel that way, you've built up some type of defense mechanism for yourself in some way. Explore what that is and challenge yourself to go toward who you really are. Because I think that there's a gap that has to be filled in that space. The movie Precious, know you remember that. She was going through all the stuff that she was going through, and she would have those moments when she would imagine the best version of herself. Right. Who she wanted on that stage and all those things that she was doing. And I challenge a lot of the clients that I deal with, actually all of them that I deal with, to understand that you're not imagining yourself as anything that you're not. The gap is you stepping from where you are today into who you were born to be. If you imagine yourself, let's say 3 years from now, that grandiose idea of who you are, like how Precious was doing in the movie, what would that person 3 years from now tell the person sitting today? Because they're the same people. You just have to bridge the gap to get there. And everything that you need to do that is within you. So that's to me, that was what was key for me.
So then, that being key, how do you let me back up. That being the key, how I believe that sometimes addressing truths, especially when you're unraveling a truth, can create depression. It can create sadness. It can create darkness. So how do you address then, once you overcome that fear and you're saying, okay, this is the truth, and then it generates an emotion of depression or a negative emotion? How do you address that depression while still pressing towards your truth?
I think that depression is a symbol of, and I don't want to, for people watching, I can only speak from my experience. I don't want to let my opinions or anyone think that I'm saying this about anyone who's ever experienced depression. I have. So I can speak from a space of what worked for me. For me, depression, that feeling of hopelessness, it came from me feeling like I was not empowered to actually make the change. Depression started to dissipate for me when I started to feel the way that I was feeling, when depression started to come on, which makes you want to sit and do absolutely nothing. Made me want to be a recluse and check out from everything and everybody. And once I started to understand that I was feeling that way because I felt like I didn't have any power, then getting up when I wanted to sit down, going out when I wanted to stay in, and I'm not talking about partying, even just putting myself in a space to engage intellectually, which is really who I am. Pushing forward is what brought me past depression, because if I'm feeling hopeless, the feeling of hope is just not going to show up and fly in your room and sit in your lap while you under the covers, eating a whole bunch of ice cream and getting fatter when you know that you really don't want to. That's not going to happen. The only way to get past that is to move. Choose movement. And I'm just going to keep it 100. When I was in that space, most of what I thought about doing, my negative reel, no sooner than I was thinking about moving forward. If I said, okay, there's an event that's going, I've been invited. The last 3, I've said I'm not going to, made an excuse why I couldn't go. This one I'm going to go to. I'm going to make it a point to go there. No sooner than that happened, then that negative reel in my mind started giving me 105 reasons why I should just get back into bed and eat some more ice cream and be mad about the fact that I'm in the bed eating ice cream.
Exactly.
But choosing to move past that moment, because understand that that's just a moment. You don't know that it's a moment, so you get up and move.
Right.
Once you move past that moment, you create moments of hope. You create moments of purpose. you create some balance, you create some courage, you start to build on those areas in which you're insecure. So there is no easy way to get beyond that space other than to move forward, and not just in your mind, physically get up and put yourself in a position where you are required to step outside of the game in your mind, because that's a game. That real is strong, but it's just a game. And you start to chip that down when you choose to move forward, even though everything in you is telling you to stay in a space that is draining you. And I'll conclude this with this, because when you're in that space, you already know what to expect. You know, if I sit still, even though everything in me is saying, yeah, sit still, I know that I'm going to remain feeling like I'm nothing, feeling like telling myself what I can't do and what I should have done and could have done. You already know what to expect. Okay. On the other side of that, you don't know what to expect. But why would you stay in a space of misery because you know what to expect, and use that as a justification for not moving forward into the unknown, which is definitely different than what you're doing?
Right. Right.
You know, so I chose different, even though I did not know what in that unknown different was going to be. I chose different because anything has to be better than what I know this is going to stay if I sit here. So that's what I did. I just moved forward.
Yeah, movement is life. They talk about I think was it the rivers or water or something like that, that it's constantly in motion. And if water was not in motion, like there would be honestly no life on this planet. Like we would have no viable source of water if all water was motionless. We would basically have to worry about disease and infestation and all kinds of things that would come from water being stagnant. So that motion, that getting up and pushing yourself just to get into the sunlight and allow some vitamins from the sun just kind of like hit you and energize you. That is nurturing. And depression, you know, on the bed, I wasn't on the bed when I was depressed. I was on the couch. But on the depression on the couch is very much apparently like depression on the bed, except for I wasn't really eating. I was just on the couch and wasn't watching TV, wasn't thinking, wasn't reflecting. I'm sure there was a negative reel that was playing, but I don't even think I was paying attention to that. I was just occupying space. So I definitely agree. You got to have that motivation to get yourself up, even though it's like a commitment. Even though you don't want to do it, you know that your authentic you wants to do it, but the current you doesn't want to do it. So you get up and do it anyway because it's going to push you to who you want to be.
That's right.
We also touched on this in the beginning, kind of identifying, you know, when to scrap the whole project and start building again, and when to say, okay, this part doesn't work, take that out and start building upon what you already have. Excuse me. Excuse me. For yourself, have you had those moments where you just completely wanted to scrap the project, start all over, build a completely new you? And secondary to that, have you experienced those moments where you felt like you did or didn't deserve truly a fresh start? And I'll give you some more after, but I want to hear your answer to that.
Oh, well, I'll start with the last one first. Did I feel like I didn't deserve a fresh start? Absolutely. You know, I think I've been my own worst critic. I've been my own worst critic. And I just made so many things so huge that really were not in my life, you know, and it stopped me from really living in and taking ownership of my gifts and who I was meant to be. So I've absolutely felt that way. And to the first question, yeah, scrapping it and starting all over, that's where I am today. That is where I am today. You and I, we talked a little bit about that off air. But absolutely, that's where I am today. You know, I got to a point in my life where I realized that so much of what I'd done was based on me wanting a certain status and wanting to be able to have certain things in my life. And none of the things that I did really had authentically who I am in mind. It was all about accomplishing and getting certain worldly things. But there was really no space for who Taralyn authentically is in it. So I've accomplished a lot, but I've always been left wanting. It was never enough. I couldn't get finished with one goal. And I'm a person where when I started, oh, I'm going to finish it. I couldn't get finished with one thing and even appreciate it before I was on to the next thing.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So it's just, and then my mother used to say to me when I was going through all of these different things, and she was always proud of everything that I accomplished, but she said, you know, the fact that you're always doing something and you do great at all of it that you do, but I never hear you once pat yourself on the shoulder and say, good job, you know, or take a moment to really sit in it and be proud of yourself. You'll get into something and no sooner than it's finished, you done scrapped it and you're on to the next thing. She was like, you have to learn to slow down and be still. And if you can't connect to all of these things that you are accomplishing, then what really are you doing it for?
Yeah.
And when she said that, that made me just think of things differently. Yeah.
Karen said, stop and smell the roses.
Mm-hmm.
You got to stop to appreciate it or you'll just pass it by. It doesn't matter the legacy you leave if you don't get to enjoy some of it while you're leaving it.
That's true. That's true. And it made me think on a deeper level about really and truly, instead of just accomplishing and doing things, just doing stuff, you know, instead of just doing things that I can't even connect to slow down and really and truly with all of the stuff that I had put a bunch of importance on in life, without all of that, do something that really and truly matters, that you can connect to, that you can sit and be proud of, that other people can truly benefit from. Why are you here? These are questions that I had to ask myself. What is your purpose? If you're not living in purpose, then yeah, you are just doing things. You know, you just got a lot of stuff you're doing and a lot of things you can say you can experience. But at the end of the day, for what? And if you can't answer for what are they for? And outside of me, everything that I do shouldn't just be about me and what I benefit from it. It should be about other people. And if I couldn't at one point in time answer the question for what. So that's when I said, okay, I have to redo this. I have to redo this because I don't want to just have this just insatiable sense of want all the time. You know, I've been doing this for years and I'm not getting anything. So I'm not getting anywhere on a spiritual level.
Right.
Mind, body, spirit. So that's what made me scrap it, start all over. And now I know the for what, you know, I don't feel like nothing is enough anymore, you know? So absolutely. I think sometimes that's good. I think that, and sometimes that could be hard, you know, for people to step away from what they're used to and say, you know what, I'm just going to start all over. Why not? You only live once. Why not?
I'm going to just say, hey, you know what? All that I did and invested in, we're going to write that off. Bad debt.
Yep.
Bad debt. We're just going to start.
Absolutely can.
Here's the first dollar we're saving starting today. I think that goes back also to forgiveness, just being willing to forgive that you've invested all that time and all that energy. I think that's why we sometimes don't let it go, is because we're like, well, I can never forgive myself for me wasting 37 years of life to get to this point, and now I'm going to scrap everything. I can't forgive myself because that means I've wasted at least 3 decades, almost 4. But you have to get to those points where you put your pride to the side and say, you know what? This is going to produce a healthier me in the long run, in the end game. So when you're looking at that 37 years, that 30 years, those 20 years that you wasted on whatever it was, and you say, okay, but today I'm going to start being new. It doesn't mean that today immediately you are brand new, but it does mean that today you can start making choices to invest in the future that you want to be. One of my mantras since 2012 or 13 has been, we are who we are today because of who we practiced being yesterday. The question is, who are we practicing to be for tomorrow? So regardless of who you are today, because of what you've done, you can say, today, I want to now start practicing this to become this person tomorrow. So I agree that there's some things that you can't get a fresh start on. I mean, if you got, you know, I don't know, if you have something that is a lifelong ailment or something like that, you may not be able to get a fresh start on that, but your mind has the ability to be renewed. I believe they say cellularly, at the cellular level, your mind renews and rebuilds to 100% new organism every 7 years or something like that. So I think that that's very important. And also, you kind of shared a little bit about it when you say the for what. So I want to ask this question. Has there ever been times in your life where you felt like your transformation was being driven by external people?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I felt that way. Um, you know, I think when I was in that space, I felt a responsibility. I felt like my own personal, what I deemed success, because I, first of all, I had my definition of success was completely and totally backwards, but that's a different show. That's a completely different show. But I think that my idea of success at the time, I felt like a part of that was to help save other people, you
Mm,
know? And so it wasn't, in that context, that it all wasn't about me. But then again, too, those outside voices, you know, I felt a sense of responsibility, and I was made to feel that way for a long time. You know, I felt a sense of responsibility to do things in a certain way and to accomplish certain things so that other people could benefit from it. And I don't think that that's always a bad thing. However, um, I learned that whatever it is that I choose to do needs to be me fulfilling what I need to fulfill within me first.
right.
You know, I can't live my life in a way that benefits other people and make them feel comfortable, but I'm miserable doing it every day. I'm the
Right.
one who has to live it, and what it is they want, they could go live their life that way and have it. What do you need me for?
It's not on me.
You know, it's totally not on me. And so a lot of things I just had to, a lot of things I just, because I was younger, I just didn't know and I didn't understand. And I don't think everything is always negative. Sometimes people just feel like, oh, I know she can, she's capable, and they don't feel like they can,
Right.
which is fine. If you don't feel like you can, then that means that's just not the life you can have. You can't say, well, I don't feel like I can, but you can, so you go do it for us.
Right. Do it for the cause.
Right. Can't do that, you know. So yeah, I absolutely had a point in time where external things and people kind of dictated some decisions that I made. But you know better, you do better.
Mm.
You know.
It's funny you talk about people knowing that you can do something that you don't believe in yet. I had a friend who's a YouTuber as well, and he was sharing a story about how, growing up in the neighborhood we grew up in, he would see
Mm-hmm.
people selling like dope, and he'd be like, "Okay, well they're getting $600 a day. I
Yep.
want to get that kind of money."
Mm-hmm.
And he would go to some of the OGs in the game, and they'd be like, "Nah, young man, you're smart. You have a mind. You have things that you have opportunities that you can seize. This is the only opportunity that I have. I see you
Mm-hmm.
doing better things." So it's not even that they believe that they were able to get a college education and be intellectual in the sense of, not intellectual, be professionals in a legal or legitimate craft. They've
Right.
seen that in them, and they were like, I see you doing better than me, so I'm not even going to teach you this game or this skill set so you can
Yeah.
get this fast money. So there are those moments where somebody else's belief in you is greater than their own belief in themselves.
Mm-hmm.
That can be, I think, nurturing into helping you become who your authentic self is.
Absolutely.
One of the things that was posted here, I think, it says Brian Gill says, there are people there are people who never design, who I think he meant who were never designed to be anything. And then I asked him to elaborate. He said, some people grew up with a direction or exact desire to be a doctor or a lawyer, but there are some people who are just marginally good at everything and do not have a lane, a jack of all trades type. So okay, so that clarifies what he was saying, because I thought he was just saying some people were designed to just be nothing, but he's saying that some people's destinies are flexible based on their diverse skill set. So I understand what you're saying. Thank you for clarifying, Brian.
Yeah.
The next question I want to ask, and we're coming towards the end, we're actually approaching an hour already.
Oh
So
wow.
before I ask this question, I want to give those who are still in the live video an opportunity to chime in with any questions or anything else that you would like to add to the conversation. And then I'm going to ask a few more questions and then present some tips from my perspective on this topic. But the next question I want to ask is that, you know, how do you unravel truths, going back to that, you know, that interweave truth belief? How do you unravel truths without losing who you yourself are?
For me, I can always feel, I know the truth. And for me, um, especially, I'm the type of person where I don't tend to be a front man in situations. I want to fall to the back. Now I can be put into any situation and I'm good, but I don't choose to be the front man in most situations. So for me, truth can sometimes be something where I'm like, ah, dang, I don't really want to be bothered with that. I mean, come on, really? You know, that's, but I can always feel it. Within me, I know what the truth is, and I want the truth. I want to live in truth. I want to live in authenticity. So the truth is a challenge that I now embrace, because the truth sometimes is challenging. It
Mm.
really is. So I've just learned to trust myself, and it's not about necessarily what I think about what the truth is or what it may cost me to live in that. It's worth it to me
Right.
because it's who I am. So when I feel that, because I always feel it first, I'm going for it. I'm not moving backwards. And it's always forward sometimes, the resistance from the back and then moving forward. It's always a little tough in the beginning. And not always, a lot of the times it's tough in the beginning, but that's only a moment.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think about what I'm feeling in that moment when some truth comes. I'm like, oh God, I'm not in the mood for this right now. No, really, no, this is not what I'm hearing. If I get to that space, then that's okay. I know that's just a moment. I'm going to trust what I feel and move forward because that's authentically who I am. That's authentically who I always want to be.
Okay. I think sometimes in those moments when we're unraveling truths, we feel like it's eternity. Like we're just lodging through the mud trying to
Right.
get to the other side of the river. And it's like, no, actually, it's not as long as you mentally feel like it may be. It may be 2 days, but when you put 2 days up against however long you've been here, unless it's the second day you were born, it's not a lifetime. So
Right. Right.
I think that's important to remember, is that what it feels like is not necessarily what it is. And if you can get over that temporary discomfort or that temporary lull, you're able to grow and get through to the other side.
Yeah.
So oh, well, one of my cousins is watching live, and he said, I'm mobile. I can't chat much, but very enlightening Intersation. Thanks, cousin, for creating this platform." And then Karen Nelson also says that there is freedom in truth, and the truth will set you
Yes.
free. Whoo!
Yes.
How about not only the truth will set you free, the truth will keep people from being able to imprison you, because that's where blackmail and all those different things where you're scared that these things that have really happened in your life are going to come to the light. That's why people are like, oh, you're so transparent, Billy. I wish I could be like you. I'm like, I don't do this because I want people to be encouraged to be transparent. I do this so that especially now that I'm on a visual platform, I don't have to worry about people trying to bring up my mistakes and my errors and being like, oh, well, but Billy, you did this, and but Billy, you did that. No,
they will.
It removes and undercuts that power of blackmail and shame and fear and doubt. That negative reel is a pretty big one for me. So I got to make sure I keep that way off in the archives unless I need to go and research it to find an answer to something. So
yes. I love that.
The truth is truly freedom. So with that, I don't have any questions that are appearing in the chat. You guys are welcome to place any questions that you may have in the chat, but I want to give an opportunity for Taralyn to provide us with, from this conversation today, if I'm a part of the audience and I'm listening to this conversation, which I am part of the audience, what would be like 2 to 3 points that you feel are critical for us to take with us today?
First and foremost, there's never any hypocrisy in evolution. You walk your own pathway and you be true and own who you are and what feels good on the inside to you. And feeling is important to me because I believe that we're all spiritual people, and there's always inner talk of truth and good, you know, just like there may be experiences with negative. So that would be number one. Number two, you can at any point in time invest in resetting whatever your negative reel may be. Your negative experiences and things that you may not be proud of, they are not who you are. Actually, they serve a positive, or actually they have a positive purpose in your life. So I would say, you know, definitely learn from the things that you're probably not proud of and take from those everything that you need to push you forward. Finally, forgiveness. Forgiveness for yourself is key, because, you know, you're meant to be here and to learn from not doing things correctly. That doesn't speak to who you are as a person. It only speaks to what you're capable. It's not how you fall that matters, it's how you get up and move forward. That's everything.
Right. No, I agree with that 100% of the time. How you get up, how you recover. Look, it's inevitable you're going to trip at some point.
Absolutely.
The question is if you fall and hit the ground, do you get up? Actually, embarrassing story, but I was out at a park in Utah, and it was nighttime, and this gust of wind came and kicked up dirt. And so I pulled my mask that I had on over my eyes, but for some reason I didn't tell myself to stop walking. And so I tripped over a bale of hay and like just bite it, land on the ground, and I'm on the ground, and I'm like, did I just really fall to the ground? But I was cracking up laughing because it was like, I don't think I can remember the last time I fell like this in life. And so, I mean, I'm dirty, I'm dusty. But when I got up, the person that I was with was like, hey, you know, are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. And she's laughing at me, whatever. But I get up and I dust myself off and I enjoy the rest of my time in this park. And it's sometimes we get down, we fall metaphorically, and we stay on the ground and we want to cry about it, we pout about it, or now I'm leaving and now I'm embarrassed. And so we become much more destructive, and less likely to glean any lesson from the fall that we've taken. So I agree with that.
I love that.
Got to be able to get up after the fall. So with that, I do want to thank you, and I'm going to give you an opportunity to do some closing comments. Actually, I want to give you an opportunity right now to do some closing comments, and then I want to provide what I call tools for the first row. So as you guys can see, the channel is First Row. The reason it is because when I was younger, I was taught that the people who sit on the first row, they make the most money and they get the most information because there's no distraction between them and the speaker. So I have this thing that I like to present at the end of every Intersation called Tools for the First Row. You are sitting on the first row, so I want to make sure I give you those tools. But before I give you those tools, Taralyn, can you just give us a close for what your thoughts were for the conversation today? Love the tips that you gave. Go ahead and shoot.
First and foremost, I have to say thank you so much for having me, Billy. As usual, you drop pearls of wisdom. I love the questions that you ask. You always take it deep. I would just like to say to everyone watching, thank you guys for tuning in, and just keep in mind that you matter. You were not born onto this planet to not matter and have a divine and ultimate purpose. And when I say divine, I'm not speaking to any specific God. I'm talking about as a soul living and breathing on this planet, you serve an individual, unique purpose. And everything that's happened in your life is for a reason. It's up to you to find that reason, connect to it, and just go out through life shining. Be a beam of light. That's it. Thank you.
No, thank you. Get your shine on. And you dropped tons of jewels, so I'm definitely appreciative of you being here today as well. So going to the tools for the first row, I thought of about four. I always think about 4 or 5 different tools. I think I have 5 in this particular stance. That when I started thinking about truthful transformation, what that means to me, and how I have tried to use truth to transform myself over the years. So the first tool that I came up with was that you have to make a commitment to honesty. And Brian Gill, I'm going to paraphrase because I can't see it right now in the live chat, but he stated that people typically lie because they have a fear of being judged. And if you are going to judge yourself, you will typically attempt to lie to yourself to paint yourself in the best possible picture for yourself. So the first thing is that you have to have that commitment to honesty, and that's regardless of what it looks like. Look, when I went through my first divorce, I had to look inside to see what were my shortcomings, not just blaming, oh, well, that didn't work out. She was tripping. She was always nagging. None of that stuff. I had to look at myself and say, okay, where did I let myself down in this marriage? And where did me letting myself down translate into letting the marriage down, translating into the marriage dissolving? And one of the things I had to address was that, damn, Billy, you have a temper. Like, you get mad quick about sometimes small things, sometimes big things. So I had to really start looking at the why, the for what. Why are you getting mad? And for what purpose does it serve? Well, it serves the purpose of, when I was younger, I would throw tempers and I would get my way because people didn't want to deal with it. Not necessarily with my parents. They would just whoop my butt. And then I say, okay, temper over. But with life in general, I could typically throw a temper, puff up my chest, and that would intimidate people enough for me to get what it was that I was seeking to get. And so when I started looking at that, I had to start asking myself, do I want to be this person with a temper? Do I still have a temper today? Absolutely, I do. But is my temper in a healthier manner? Am I throwing temper tantrums? No, not really. I don't really throw and engage with those, because my why is that I want to get the things that I deserve and the things that I have earned, not because I scared somebody into giving them to me, not because I scared somebody into loving me, but because I have been who I am, and that's who that person wants to resonate those emotions and those feelings for. So that's the first thing, is just being committed to honesty. And also realizing that honesty, going back to that foundation, will build you a stronger foundation for you to not have to worry when turbulent wind comes or somebody's knocking on your door or whatever it may be. You'll have a strong enough foundation to not get knocked off your base. So honesty, committing to honesty, is the first tool that I thought of. The second tool is evaluate your truths regularly. And part of that is the why, asking yourself the why. But the other thing is, and I think this is the most powerful thing that I got while I was reflecting about this particular topic, was that it's not just about asking yourself questions. Why do I believe this? Where did this come from? All these different things. We as humans, individuals, have the ability to look at, unless you have Alzheimer's, the ability to look at the past, our own past, and pull ourselves out of the situation and observe what our actions were in a third party type of way. So from a third person perspective. So go back and evaluate your truths, but look at how your actions are stating what your truths really are. So I could tell people all day long, my truth is that I don't have a temper anymore. But if I go back and I'm looking at every single moment that I'm dealing with adversity, if I'm jumping back in action-wise into that temper tantrum state, then my truth, what I'm saying it is not really what it is. And it's really that I still have a temper and I still throw tantrums and I'm trying to use that. Then the question is why am I still throwing temper tantrums at the age of 37? So that was the second tool. And the other thing that kind of helped me clarify that was understanding the difference between societal information and what your actual belief is. So society will tell us, doctors and professionals will say, it's important that you work out, that you exercise 3-4 times a week. And so that may be a belief or information that you believe to be true. But just because you believe the information to be true does not mean that it is your truth. Because if you're week after week sitting on the couch, not working out, no physical activity, not taking walks, and you live a sedentary lifestyle, then even though you know the information and you agree with the information, that is informational agreement. That is not your true belief. Your true belief is that exercise is not important. And this is why your actions don't line up with that, with the information that society has. So that's the second thing, is evaluate your truths regularly and be able to discern the difference between looking at your actions and how they align with your truth. The third thing, was you have to plant and nurture healthy stories. I got to stop saying you have to do things. This is a channel of choice. You should, or you could choose to plant and nurture healthy stories. So going back to that negative reel, I love that concept, by the way, Taralyn, the negative reel. You get to choose how often you want to play that reel. Like I said, my reel sits in an archive. I know all the negative things that I do intimately, or have done, do, and probably will do intimately. If I need information from that, not to tear myself down, but to continue to build myself up, I can visit those, or I can visit that. But when it comes to planting new stories, they talk about the power of positivity. When your focus and your energies and the things that you're telling yourself internally align with positive growth, evolution, and things that are healthy for you, you are going to naturally deviate towards that, because those stories kind of guide your truths. So one of the, I think it was in one of my psychology books that I had read, there was they talk about, I don't know if you're familiar with, Taralyn, stereotype threat and stereotype boost, or stereotypical threat and stereotypical boost. What that is basically, in short, stereotypical threat is there's a stereotype about you that relates to you that lowers your ability to perform in a certain area, and stereotypical boost is there's a stereotype about you that increases your ability to perform in an area. And they did it on a very small group of people, so not that it speaks for the world, but a very small group of women. They took Asian women and they put them into this math experiment where they were going to do taking a math test. And a part of the group, they basically said, stereotypically, you are Asian and Asians are good at math. And so they tried them with this stereotypical boost. The other group, they told them nothing. They just let them come in with whatever their thoughts and their beliefs were. And the other group, they told, well, you are gender. They used a stereotypical threat of gender. You're a woman, and women typically produce lower at math. And then they gave them all this test. And in that priming of information, they were able to see that women who were identifying with Asians were smart at math and they're good at math, and I'm Asian, they performed better than the group that were told you're a woman and they produce lower, they perform lower, or are less talented at solving math problems. So there was a gap between those two groups. There was obviously the middle group, the test group, or the control group in the middle, but just it goes to show the importance of the story that we are telling ourselves and how we nurture it and how we dig it in and set it and help it establish its roots. So I thought that was something that was very important, is that we plant and we nurture ourselves with healthy stories. And then the fourth thing is fine tuning. And I think Karen shared this as well, as far as fine tuning that story, fine tuning that experience. So going back to the truth that you're told when you're a kid, the boogeyman, and, stay in the bed because there's a monster in your closet and under your bed. If you get out of bed, parents tell you, if you get out of bed in the middle of the night, the monster under your bed is going to grab your legs because they don't want you waking up in the middle of the night.
Yep.
Now you in the bed terrified that somebody's under your bed when there's nothing under your bed. So you have to be able to also fine tune your truths. But in fine tuning your truths, what fine tuning your truth also allows you to do is to keep from being in that mentality of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Well, in the case of there being a monster under the bed, I'm pretty sure it's okay to throw that out. It's going to be okay. But in the case of other things, whether it's me being a black male or being an African American male in America, there's some truths that parts of them I can throw out, but parts of them I need to either retain or be aware of so that I keep myself in a place of safety and don't put my life in the hands of chance as much as possible. So that was the fourth thing, is just fine tuning your truths and realizing that you're not a final draft. You're a rough draft all the way through this thing. So at some point you may reach the end, but by then, all these truths will be locked in stone. But until then, they're all subject to change. And don't be afraid to make that change if necessary. And then the last tool that I have for the first row is understand that truth acts as a natural guide through transformation. And the best way to describe that is if I'm in the rainforest or the jungle and I don't know where I'm at, if I can find the river and follow the flow of the river, it will typically lead you out of the jungle. And so truth operates in that same stance. It's like the river that is carving your path through life. And the moment you engage with it, the moment you embrace it, the moment you allow it to envelop you, that moment is what starts acting as the compass for all the decisions that you make. And every time you go back and you look and you say, did that action line up to what I want that truth to be? If the answer is no, then you need to start either tweaking the truth to meet the action, if the action is what you really want, or you got to start tweaking the action to line up with the truth. So those are the 5 tools that I came up with for the first row. I hope you guys enjoyed them. Taralyn, man, I love doing these shows. I almost don't want it to end, but I'm going to go ahead and shout out the last few comments that I see in the chat, just to close that, and then I'll give closing thoughts as well. Excellent topic from Karen Nelson and show. Really enjoyed the conversation. Brian Gill, I have a temper, but I own it though. Hey, that's where you got to start with, is the ownership of it.
Right.
Then Brian also says, I just try to remove myself from argumentation and confrontational people and situations so as not to blow a fuse on people. Hey, sometimes I tell people all the time, look, if I'm in an argument with a woman and we're in a house, please believe I have no problem jumping out the window to safety to get away from the situation, because I'm very combative. So I have to know that about myself and keep myself out of physical altercation, whether it's with male or female. And then lastly, we have Karen Nelson. Love the perspective that life is a first draft with room to always rewrite. True story there. So I appreciate you guys tuning in today. If you haven't already, please take a moment to subscribe to the First Row YouTube channel. I'm looking for growth content 24/7. So if there's something that you want to talk about or want me to bring up in an Intersation, please share that in the comments. But I can't thank you guys enough for coming and being a part of today's show on a Saturday morning or a Saturday afternoon, depending on what time zone you're in. But I appreciate you guys being here today. As always, if you like this video, please share this video. If you share this video, please like this video. So either way, like the video and share the video. We're always happy to engage with you in the comments. We're always happy to engage in the chat. But until then, the next show that will be on the First Row YouTube channel will actually be Tuesday's Intersation, which is Tuesday is always Intersation Day, unless it's Christmas or New Year's Eve this year. But it will be on Tuesday at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. If it's Eastern, then that's 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But that will be a topic on self-love with one of my monthly guests, Moses Jenkins. If you haven't caught any of the Intersations with him, go back and catch one of those. They're really fun. They're always like energetic and full of information. But other than that, I look forward to seeing you guys on the First Row again next week. And we will touch base then. So thank you guys for tuning in. One love, peace, and God bless.